The first wave of free agency just wrapped up, and that's going to impact our wide receiver rankings in a bunch of different ways. We saw receivers change teams. We saw quarterbacks change teams. Both of those are going to change a lot of players. We have players like Drake London shooting up the rankings. So make sure to stay tuned to see where he is. Dak, start us off on our S tier, though.
So S tier, like Dalton mentioned, a lot of changes. We've got Jamar Chase now as our number one wide receiver in Dynasty. This is because Justin Jefferson's quarterback Kirk Cousins just went to Atlanta. So Jamar Chase is tied to Joe Burrow for effectively his entire career. It's a great quarterback to be tied with. And Jamar Chase is an elite receiver. He hasn't hit like wide receiver one overall production yet, but that's definitely something he can get to, especially with the healthy season of Joe Burrow. We're going to have him near number one overall.
At wide receiver 2, we have Justin Jefferson. Obviously, takes a bit of a hit with Cousins leaving. Question marks quarterback right now, they only have Darnold. They could move up or take JJ at 11. But Jefferson did show that once Cousins got hurt this year, that he still is an elite producer regardless of who's under center. Does take a small bit of a hit, which is why we moved him below Chase. Obviously, elite talent, elite production. We'll have him here at wide receiver 2. Dalton, who do you have at wide receiver 3?
Hey guys, real quick, make sure to subscribe and like the video. We're trying to reach 100 subscribers, and when we do, we'll be giving away a free roster review. Now, back to the video. Wide receiver 3 is going to be CeeDee Lamb, coming off a wide receiver 1 overall finish. CeeDee Lamb is someone that a lot of fantasy players were waiting a couple years for him to really have that breakout, and last year he did it. He had a fantastic year. Dak Prescott was slinging him the ball. He was really the only option in that entire offense that was any good, which is kind of looking like it's going to repeat this year. They don't really have anything else. Maybe they'll add someone in the draft, but I'm not really seeing it. I think CeeDee Lamb's going to have another monster year. Maybe doesn't have quite the talent that Chase and Jefferson have, though. I think that's a little bit of a question mark for me, which is why we have Chase and Jefferson higher. Dak, who's our last player in S tier?
So last player in S tier, we've got Marvin Harrison Jr. You've heard it all by now. He's the best wide receiver prospect, at least since Jamar Chase. He's got that superstar talent. He's got the Ohio State pedigree. He's got the pedigree with his dad. He's a great prospect, and he's going to go probably to a pretty good landing spot. He's just a really, really good wide receiver, and he's young, so we've got him in this S tier. We think he can produce like a Jefferson or a Chase. So we got him in this S tier. Jeff, who's starting off the A tier?
The A tier, starting off wide receiver 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown, had a great year with the Lions. He's really been up and coming the past couple years, tied to Goff, who just distributes the football really well. Lions offense is really good. Amon-Ra is just a flat-out stud. We have him starting off this A tier. Dalton, who do you have at wide receiver 6?
Next we're going to have Puka Nacua, who just had broke all the records as a rookie wide receiver, had an absolutely amazing year. The only real question mark for me with Puka Nacua is how long is Stafford going to play football for? I think he's like 37, which is really getting up there in age, but as of right now, he's still an elite distributor of the football. Puka Nacua is the top target in the offense now, taking over Cooper Kupp's role, and he's going to be a stud for as long as Stafford's there. And as soon as Stafford moves on, hopefully they can replace him. If not, then that's why we have Puka a little bit lower than these other guys, but still a great wide receiver to have, a hammer. Dak, round out this A tier for us.
So rounding out this A tier, we've got Garrett Wilson. This is a guy who's proven to be quarterback proof. He's produced with any quarterback you can name. They're all trash, and he's still put up fantasy points regardless. So imagine what he's going to turn into when Aaron Rodgers gets back. Especially, Rodgers has said he wants to play for multiple years, not just this upcoming year. Aaron Rodgers connecting with Garrett Wilson is going to be special, and we think he's got the talent to deserve this wide receiver 7 ranking. Even though he hasn't necessarily produced like that, we think he's going to once Rodgers starts playing football. So Jeff, who we got starting off the B tier?
Starting off the B tier, we have wide receiver 8, A.J. Brown. People might be wondering why he isn't in the A tier. It's simply because he's getting a little older than those guys. Still good, still tied to Jalen Hurts, but we have him wide receiver 8. Dalton, who do you have a wide receiver 9?
Wide receiver 9 is going to be Malik Neighbors coming out of LSU. We expect Malik Neighbors to be at least a top 9 pick, likely a top 6 pick, right? He's got a couple of different spots where he can end up that would greatly impact where we have him in our rankings. If he ends up at the Chargers, which is a very likely landing spot, I think he could move up into that A tier. If he ends up on, let's say, the Giants, he could move down all the way down to that C tier. But Malik Neighbors is a great talent. A lot of people have him over Marv, which is a little rich for us, but he's still a very, very good player. Would be a wide receiver 1 of a lot of classes. Just someone we're very excited about. Dak, who else we got here?
Yeah, so next up, we've got Chris Olave. This is a guy who maybe hasn't produced the first couple years like people thought he would, but we'd still like to bet on talent in Dynasty, and Chris Olave has a ton of talent. Looking into year 3, he's really young. He could definitely produce better than he has the first 2 years. We feel pretty good about that. He's very talented. He's going to produce. Jeff, who do we got next?
Yeah, wide receiver 11, rounding out the B tier, we have Tyreek Hill, speedster wide receiver. We've seen it for years. He's on the Dolphins now with Mike McDaniel. Really don't know what's going to happen with Tua, but really don't expect much change there. He did say he was looking to retire after the 2025 season, but with these wide receivers, you never know. I'm not really putting too much into it. We have him here because he's an elite fantasy producer when he's on the field, kind of like we say about McCaffrey, where you kind of just ride him until it breaks, where when he's playing, you need to have him ranked this high solely because of what he could do any given Sunday for you. Dalton, start us off with the C tier.
So the C tier, we're going to start off with that player I talked about, Drake London. He moved a lot of spots up our ranking. Some people have even higher than this. We are actually like below industry standard. People have him as high as 8 or 9. We have him at 12. We still think that's very good. We're very excited about Drake London getting that Kirk Cousins upgrade at quarterback. They've had shit quarterback play for as long as I can remember while Drake London's been there. But now they have Kirk Cousins. Drake London is going to have that elite upside unlocked, and hopefully he can produce the numbers that we think he can. Could be wide receiver 1 as soon as next year. Hopefully he can do that for us. Dak, who we got next?
Yeah, we got DJ Moore. Speaking of quarterback upgrades, Caleb Williams is going to come in there as the #1 overall pick, and he's going to really help DJ Moore. DJ Moore, even with Justin Fields, was already a top 6 fantasy receiver just from this past season. So I expect that continue. They brought in the Keenan Allen, who I don't really think cuts into his targets that much. Like, if anything, if there was no Keenan Allen, I have him over Drake London. That's probably it. DJ Moore is a really talented receiver, and Caleb Williams is there throwing the ball to him for the foreseeable future. We like him here in this tier. Jeff, what do you got next?
Next up, Nico Collins, player that really burst onto the scene last year, was quiet his first couple of years, but when Stroud walked in there, Nico was Stroud's guy. Age 24, nice young receiver to build your team around, tied to Stroud for the foreseeable future, and just an absolute dog on the football field. So, Dalton, who do you have next after Nico Collins?
So running off our C tier, we have Brandon Ayuk. Now we're a little lower than industry standard on Ayuk. That's just because he's hyper efficient. We made a sure about Ayuk, made a price tag about Ayuk. He's very good. He's a good wide receiver. He doesn't see the targets that we like our wide receivers to see. And we want more of that like 10 targets per game. He's more like that 7, 8 targets per game. And that's okay. Because he's hyper efficient. At least last year he was, but we're just a little lower because we like our receivers to be able to demand those targets. But still a great wide receiver to have. Dak, we got in D tier.
Yes, starting off this D tier, we've got Michael Pittman, who re-signed with the Colts for the next 3 years. He's got Anthony Richardson throwing him the football. Michael Pittman's another guy who's produced with any quarterback that you've had with him, whether it's Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, those guys. So Anthony Richardson, at worst, it's the same kind of production, but maybe Anthony Richardson is an upgrade in passers than we've seen in previous years. And Michael Pittman, is going to be his go-to guy, produces 15 points per game. That should definitely continue. He's a nice receiver to have. So yeah, we're going to have him starting off this tier. Jeff, who do you got next?
Next up we have Devonta Smith. Again, I talked about A.J. Brown earlier. Devonta Smith, really nice offense with Jalen Hurts. Really good receiver, gets open. Good route runner, good speed. Everything that you'd want in a wide receiver, except for the fact that he's not the alpha. But again, he's really efficient when he does get the football, and he's just really talented. So that's why we have him in the D tier here. Dalton, who do you got up next?
So next we have T. Higgins. T. Higgins requested a trade. We don't know if he's going to actually get traded or not, but as of right now, he's on the Bengals, and the Bengals are a good spot to be. Joe Burrow likes to throw the ball. T. Higgins likes catching the ball. He's a pretty good wide receiver. He's not in that elite tier of talent, but he is pretty damn good. He's going to be that back-end wide receiver too for probably a long time. And if he goes to a new team, maybe that can unlock more upside for him. It's going to be hard to beat the Bengals, even being the wide receiver 2 on the Bengals is still a really good spot to be. But, maybe he goes to a team like the Jags and he can be the wide receiver 1 there. And, Trevor Lawrence can probably supply him pretty well. So, Higgins, good player. Dak, we got next.
Yes, next we got Jalen Waddle, who's a player similar to like a Devontae Smith or T. Higgins. He's a really good 2 stuck behind an alpha 1. Jalen Waddle this season had a down year, especially looking at his first 2 years. So maybe he can turn it around coming up in his 4th year. But still, he is competing with Tyreek Hill for targets, which is really tough. He just doesn't have the upside that we would like to see. But he's still a good wide receiver too. So we're going to have him in this tier. Jeff, who do we got next?
Next up, we have Rome Odunze, who's going to be coming into the league this upcoming NFL draft. Wide receiver out of Washington. Really good producer in college. Our wide receiver 3 in this rookie class right now. Landing spots are to be determined, but he probably will get top 15 draft capital if I had to guess, which is a really nice draft capital for a receiver to have. He would be a little higher if Neighbors and Marv weren't so good. We really like Odunze, but with no draft capital yet, no landing spot, we have him at wide receiver 20, subject to change based off draft capital, landing spot, etc.
So rounding off this D tier, I'm going to have Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice had a really great end to his rookie year, fantastic end to his rookie year. He doesn't have those long and intermediate routes figured out quite yet because he's really has a really small ADOT, but he's fantastic after the catch. He's amazing after the catch. And if he can just sort of figure out those intermediate and longer routes with Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball, the sky is the limit for Rashee Rice. Even if he can't figure those out, he's still going to be a pretty damn good receiver just because Mahomes is going to throw for a ton of yards every year, and Rashee Rice is going to be a big beneficiary of that. Could see him even higher soon after the beginning of next year if he breaks on the scene again and really proves that he is who he was at the end of last season. Dak, start us off in our E tier.
Yeah, so next off, starting off this E tier, we've got George Pickens. If you're a Pickens owner, you're absolutely ecstatic. He just got Russell Wilson in this offseason, a quarterback upgrade. They also shipped out Deontay Johnson. So there's really, as of right now, no target competition, and he's a really talented receiver. He was our second highest riser in our rankings. The sky is the limit with George Pickens. He just needs to produce, and we're going to have him flying up the rankings even more. But yeah, great spot for Pickens right now. Jeff, what do we got next?
Yeah, next up we have DK Metcalf, wide receiver for Seattle. People were looking for JSN to really move in and take some targets away from DK, but JSN really didn't do that. DK is still the alpha there. Really good receiver. Not too old yet. He's, I believe, 25, maybe 26, but not anywhere close to where you're worried yet. DK's really good receiver. Geno's really not great, but talent will prevail there. DK is solid. Dole, who you got next?
Next up, we got Tank Dell. Had a really solid start to his rookie year before he got hurt. Tied to CJ Stroud for the future, which is fantastic. He's 24 years old, which is a little old for a rookie, but that's okay. Great player to have. Very exciting rookie. Dak, we got next.
Yes, next up we got Brian Thomas Jr. coming about LSU. We definitely could have him higher, maybe lower, kind of like we've said throughout the video. We don't know draft capital, we don't know landing spots, but he's a really talented receiver. He produced alongside Malik Neighbors. Really talented guy. Landing spot to be determined. So until then, we're going to have him here just because we like the talent. Jeff, what do we got next?
Next up, we have Zay Flowers, wide receiver for the Ravens. Had a really nice rookie year, nothing too crazy. But he's tied to Lamar, obviously. A nice after-the-catch weapon for him. Not really much more to say about Flowers. Just a really solid piece to have on your roster. Young, going to his second year. Hopefully he will improve a bit, but really good regardless. Dole, who you have up next?
Next, we're going to have Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison is one of the biggest losers from free agency, losing Kirk Cousins, but still had a very solid rookie year. And hopefully, when they bring in JJ or if they have Sam Darnold or maybe somebody else, he'll be able to produce at the same level he did with Kirk Cousins. Dak finishes off here.
Yes, last we got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who didn't really have a great offseason so far. They re-signed Tyler Lockett, so he looks to be the clear wide receiver 3, at least for this upcoming season. Still Geno Smith throwing the football, so I don't really think he can support 3 receivers in that offense. Until they get rid of Lockett, he's kind of just stuck in this purgatory of not a great ranking. He has that first-round draft capital, but it really doesn't matter much right now just because of the situation that he's in. But it could change. Who knows? We're going to have him here for right now, though.
All right, so those are our rankings. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.